Hi. So I'm going to take a very wild guess. I'm going to estimate that roughly 100% of you are carrying your smartphone with you. Some of you are probably even using it as I speak. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, has been running.
Thank you, Aner. Thank you.
It's not you, it's the clicker.
It's just making me look better.
Oh.
We followed all of it.
Am I going in the wrong direction?
Finishing strong and fast.
All right, I'm done. Is it forwarding automatically? No. Anyway, so the question that Camilla Song, my former student, and I were interested in is how does having your smartphone and using it influences what you actually choose and how you come to see your choices. Well, we now use phones for everything, from shopping to foreplay, right? This question. Confused.
Can you explain that?
I will, but eventually. So this is the question. Ooh, this is again.
Missing out.
Oh, yeah, it's just a different button. Yeah. Okay, and I want to give Camilla a lot of credit for doing much of the heavy lifting in this project. She did an awesome job. So smartphones. Smartphones are pervasive. They're everywhere. We use them for a lot of things. Some of my colleagues, other schools, have started to look at how they affect how consumers behave, what they do. Avi here, is Avi here? Was here. Did some interesting work on this. Shira Melumat at Warrington did some really groundbreaking work on this. A lot of things where, a lot of domains, a lot of contexts where smartphones change how we behave, how we make decisions. But this is the question, now if I finally got a hang of how to use this, this is the question that we were interested in. Do they actually influence what we choose, and if so, how? So our starting point, our conceptual starting point, is the notion that smartphones are really like no other device. I think we can all relate to this, right? It doesn't need a lot of convincing. They're by far the most personal, intimate companion that we carry with us on a daily basis. They carry our biggest secrets. They're inseparable from the self. We've all taken our phones to these unusual places or contexts. We use them in the bathroom. We take them to bed with us. Some researchers even suggested that people sometimes feel that their smartphones are like an extension of their identity or an extension of their self. So they're really very, very close to the self. And they contain a lot of information that reminds us of who we are, that is a cue, if you will, for my identity, who I am, what I feel like, what my emotions are like. So we asked some people, just to get some validation for that, we asked some people how they felt toward different devices. So how personal, how private do you feel that each of these different devices is to you? And you can see smartphones by far are the most personal, most private device, more than laptops, more than desktops. A little surprising, more than tablets. We often think of those as technologically similar, but actually in terms of usage and how we think about them, where we use them, how much we use them, very different. Also, to what extent do you feel that the smartphone is a part of yourself, about an extension of your identity? You see a very similar pattern, different main effect, but a very different pattern across devices. So that's consistent with our notion that there's something unique, something special about smartphones, and that is our starting point. So our basic premise is that phones activate a state of private self-focus. Also known, there's other constructs in the literature, private self-focus, self-focused attention. Those are largely overlapping constructs in the literature. But what it means a state of deep focus on my inner self, how I feel, who am I? I'm focusing on my attitudes, my desires. I'm actually shielding myself from external influences, from the environment, from even social cues. I'm more internally than externally oriented. I focus on these private states. And the reason we think this happens kind of has two legs. One of them is the associative nature of the interaction, the engagement with the phone. It just reminds me of all of those things, everything me. The phone is an extension of me. And when I'm there, I'm in a small private bubble where I can just be myself. And the other thing is the insulating properties of a phone. They they insulate us from the environment, right? We've all been in that situation where we text on the street or in class, or we're just isolated, insulated from the environment. I think that these two forces kind of amplify each other and contribute to this state of private self-focus. So the question is, how does this, if I'm using my phone now and I'm, the state of private self-focus is being activated, now I'm focusing on myself, how do I feel, what do I feel like right now, who am I, and I'm ignoring the rest of you, how does that influence choice and behavior? There's been a lot of work, this is a construct that's been around for several decades, a lot of work on how it tends to increase choices and preferences that are more in line with our inner preferences, with our idiosyncratic attitudes. We tend to be less compliant. We tend to rely on ourselves and not follow social cues, for example. There's also some work suggesting that it increases a sense of distinctiveness. So again, I'm focusing on myself and ignoring the rest of you, and with that comes a feeling that I'm a little more special. I just feel more different from you. I feel more special. And we feel that those things lead to some downstream effects on choice, on what people actually feel like they want to choose, how they want to express themselves. And so basically, our idea, and I should have said earlier, this presentation consists of 3 interrelated projects at different stages of the review process. And what differentiates them is the dependent variables. I'm going to show you highlights from a couple of these constituent papers. But the basic idea is that when we use our smartphone to make a choice, rather than our own laptop or our own desktop or even a tablet in some of the studies that we have, we find this effect where people use their smartphone and their smartphone. I'm going to show you some evidence that it really is unique to your smartphone, this device with which you have a very special relationship. It's not just any smartphone, and it's not the physical or ergonomic properties of the phone. It's that phone, that device to which you relate in a very special way. Using it activates a state of private self-focus, which in turn has all sorts of downstream consequences. So one that I'm going to show you is we tend to choose more unique, more self-expressive options. It's not just confined to choice itself. Conditional on what we've chosen, we also come to see our choices as more self-expressive, more indicative, more reflective of our true inner preferences. My choices are just more me, feels like, when I'm using my phone. And as a result of that, we have more downstream consequences. Now I like my choices more. I see them. I like the brands more. I feel more connected to those brands. And I'm actually willing to pay more, willing to wait more for products of that brand, and so on. So a lot of downstream consequences of this perception that my choice is just more me. Okay? So it's both a determinant of choice and an inference that follows choice. Okay? Stuff that I'm not going to show you today, what we also find is that this often leads to increased disposition expression. So if you're generally, sort of chronically, dispositionally more, say, risk-seeking or risk-averse, you're going to be more, you behave more in line with that when you're using your phone. You're going to be more yourself when you're using your phone, less influenced by momentary situational cues. If you are more conservative, more liberal, or more higher or lower in self-control, that's going to manifest more. The correspondence between those chronic traits and your momentary behavior will tend to be greater on a phone. But I'm not going to show you evidence pertaining to that today. Just a general comment. In all the studies I'm going to show you, we actually used random assignment, right? I do experimental work, and this is one thing that I think makes this work unique. There's some prior evidence in empirical correlational context that is consistent with what we're showing, but what we have, the goods that we have to show, really nail this causality, the causal link. So all of our participants always use their own device, whether it's a laptop or their phone, or in some studies, a tablet. We developed procedures for randomly assigning people to a device. It's very easy to do when students come to the lab because you tell them to bring their laptop and a smartphone, which virtually all of them have in their bag anyway, and then you randomly assign them. That's easy. We also developed some nifty procedures for doing this on mTurk and Prolific, and I'm happy to share details later if you're interested. But it was all randomly assigned. In some of the studies I'm going to show you, we actually varied ownership of the device, but it's still randomly assigned. Okay? Tali, what a surprise.
I'm just interested in terms of the procedure. Do you in the condition where they have to use their laptops, do you limit, do you monitor whether they're also using your phone? Is that just noise, or how do you kind of?
It's very easy to control in the lab. So in the lab, it's very clean. We have less control when people do it online. We see a very similar pattern, and we do track what they've used for the study. We don't know what else they might have been engaging with at the same time, but we do keep track of how long they spend. So we can't really exclude multitasking, but it seems that people spending similar amounts of time, we definitely know that they responded to those stimuli on the assigned device. And like I said, the patterns online are very, very consistent with the patterns we have in the lab, where it's really clean and really controlled. So that's as best we can do. Okay, I want to show you some evidence. I'm going to start with a few simple main effect studies just to show you the range of behavior. So what does it mean when I say a self-expressive or kind of uniqueness-seeking self-expressive choice? What does that mean? It can manifest in different ways. So one way it can manifest is people, we find that people have an increased preference for options that we tell them have been customized for them, especially based on their individual preferences. That makes sense, right? I feel that all these interstates are salient, and I'm more likely to want to choose an option that I'm being told is made especially for me. So this is one design that we use, this charity navigator. People first complete this bogus questionnaire about how they give to charity, why they give, what their motivations are, which presumably allows us to then say, okay, we got this option that's tailored especially for you. It's not real, it's randomly assigned, but that's the procedure people go through. And then they're being told, okay, the university is collaborating with some local charities, and we're encouraging students to show their support for one charity on their Facebook page. So this is kind of semi-consequential. I mean, this has a consequence. It's realistic. The DV is perceived as real, as consequential in that moment. So which of these two local charities would you support? And then we show them two options. Obviously, everything is randomized or counterbalanced, but one option is framed as being offered to you based on your unique values and preferences, based on your responses to the questionnaire, and the other one is just sort of the popular option, what most people choose. Okay. And what we find is when people use their phone, they tend to choose the individually customized option more. They're more likely to want to endorse that charity on their Facebook page. Okay. Here's a different manifestation of essentially the same idea. Sometimes we're faced with a choice between a more standard, mainstream, mass-produced option and a more unique and rare options. You've already seen all these stimuli, right? So you know exactly what's coming. So this is a consequential decision. Which chocolate would you like to get? In the lab, this limited edition, strawberries and cream, kind of idiosyncratic, or a more generally available milk chocolate. And we find, again, a very similar pattern, where people use their phones in the lab, and on their phone, they indicate what they would like to get at the end of the study to take with them. They're more likely to choose a special, more rare, more unique option. Here's another manifestation of the same pattern. So sometimes the question is not how special it is, but what do the majority of people choose? So we show people a set of questions like these, kind of meaningless, different candy bars, different car brands, different color combinations, and we manipulate which option is presented as having been chosen and preferred by the majority of prior participants. We told them we're rerunning a study, 250 M-Turkers took this before you, and this is what the majority of people chose, or not, or the other one. And so this is a nonconformity, if you will, the tendency to shift away from the choice of the majority and want to choose something more idiosyncratic or more different. And we find a very similar pattern. Okay? So I'm showing you different manifestations of essentially the same thing, wanting to be more expressive, self-expressive, choose more unique things, and so on. Any questions so far? Tali? Okay. So,
Can I pretend to be Tali?
Yes, just for
go ahead.
So I'm wondering that, did you look at just if there's an effect of it being more difficult to...
Yes. Oh, great question. So some of the things we always measured. Difficulty, annoyance, how annoying was it to complete the task on your assigned device, how difficult it was. We also looked for brand effects. If you're using an Apple device, there's some prior work by Tanya Chartrand and other people that using Apple makes you feel more creative and special. We measured all those things. Sometimes we found effects. Sometimes completing the task on your phone did feel more annoying, more difficult, but it was never associated with any of our other effects. So even if you control for it, or it doesn't always vary, but even when it does, it doesn't interact with anything we do.
If it is more effortful, let's say, or people are more averse to spending more time on their devices, then they might go for the more unique option.
Right.
But your one is more salient.
Absolutely. So yeah, we were thinking exactly the same. We didn't find evidence that that was the case. And also, I'm going to show you some moderation evidence. Wait, I'm not done. I'm going to show you some moderation evidence that will definitely take care of that. That cannot be explained by differences in.
They use other people's phones.
That's right. So that's the moderation evidence I'm alluding to that's going to definitely take care of that. Okay. Tali, you had a comment? Okay. Okay. All right. So self-focus, right? You remember my general story. You use your smartphones, increases private self-focus, increases more self-expressive choice. We measured them. So we did mediation analysis. We measured in multiple different ways. This is just one way we did this. So this is again a customization study. So people complete this, again, bogus wine questionnaire. What are you more likely to prefer in wine? So people complete this questionnaire about their preferences and different aspects of gourmet consumption, food, and so on, which presumably, and this is adapted from an online website that tailors wine to people's preferences. And then we give them this seemingly customized option. Here's one option that is based on your unique values and preferences, or you can choose to get, and again, this is incentive compatible. You have a chance to actually win this wine, something that most other people use. The popular option, of course, everything is counterbalanced. And by now, you know, this is what I'm going to show you, people use their phones, they're more likely to choose the individually customized, the seemingly individually customized option. But we also measured private self-focus. And I want to say we measured private self-focus. We also measured public self-focus. So public self-focus is the other thing. So now that I'm standing in front of you, and I'm thinking, wow, what are they thinking about me? How am I coming through? That's public self-awareness, or public self-focus. We also measured that. But the measures we used for private self-focus was something like, during this task, being very aware of myself, my own perspective and attitudes. That's like the definition of private self-focus. And also the attentional aspect. So the second question is reverse-coded. I'm not paying attention to the environment, and I'm focusing on myself. And what we find is exactly what you'd expect. We find this mediational pattern. But we also measured private self-focus in many other ways. Now, what Nathan alluded to earlier, this notion that people are, what I said earlier, our whole story has to do with the association that you have or the way you relate to a particular device. And so if that's the case, our effect should be moderated by whose device it is. So we brought people into the lab, and we varied whether they used their own device, respective device, or a device that was owned by the lab, belonged to the lab, from the same brand. So if it's an Apple device, it's Apple. If it's a Windows, it's going to be Windows. This also takes care of a lot of physical ergonomic explanation. It's not, we're going to show that it's not about the size of the device or how you interact with the interface. It's really not about those things. So by now, it's sort of the same pattern. This was, I don't have the stimuli. We have multiple replicates of this study as well. We tried this customization study. We tried the nonconformity stimuli. They all look like this. So when people use their own device, we find the same effect. When people use their smartphone as opposed to their personal laptop, they choose this is the nonconforming. Do you like the Twix or the Kit Kat, depending on whether the majority chose that or not? People choose the more unique option, but the effect goes away. Everything goes down when people use their lab device. Okay. There's lots of other moderation evidence I'm happy to talk about later. I'm just not going to have time for that. But a lot of evidence supporting this. And I have a couple of minutes left, right? Excellent. Let me show you a little bit about those other downstream consequences. So I I use my phone, my private self-focus is activated, and now I see my choices as more self-expressive, and that leads me to feel like I like those brands, I'm more loyal to those brands, and I'm even willing to pay more for those brands. So here you choose a poster, this is incentive compatible, people choose the poster that they like, we don't find an effective device on what option they choose, and then people rate to what extent that they feel that their choice reflects their true, unique preferences, shows that they're unique. They feel more unique having made that choice. We find that effect, and we also find the downstream consequence on willingness to pay. So we ask people, if you had to pay for this poster, how much would you pay? And we find that people, surprisingly, it's cognitive consistency, but we find that people say that they're willing to pay more. A similar version of that, brand loyalty. So which of these sneaker options is your preferred option? People make their choice. Again, no effect of device on choice in this case. We measure the same self-expressiveness, to what extent I feel that my choice reminds me of my unique personality or expresses my unique personality. And then we ask, okay, so one randomly selected person will actually receive their chosen option, but in case your chosen option is temporarily out of stock, would you prefer to wait up to 1 month or get something else instead immediately? That kind of pertaining to maybe brand loyalty or how strongly I feel about my choice. And we find exactly what you'd expect, given everything that I've told you so far. People see their choice as more self-expressive, and this statistically accounts for how much they're willing to wait, how loyal they are to their choice. Okay. So, like I said, I think this is the first experimental evidence for the causal effect of smartphones and what people actually like to choose. I think that the marketing implications are straightforward. So if I'm Amazon, if I'm an online retailer, I can tell what platform, what device people are using, and based on that, do I want to show them the bestseller, or do I want to show them the, especially for you, curated especially for you? This could have implications of that. You could derive many similar marketplace implications or consequences. Also talked about the downstream consequences. A shout out to Tali here, who's done some interesting work in this domain. How I feel about those choices that I see as more reflective and more indicative of my true inner preferences, while more likely to protect